All right, so we've mastered, right? We've mastered how to make a scatter plot on our calculator and how to get a least square regression line and how to fill in the table for the residuals and the sum of the squares. But we're going to review that bit first before we move on to day one of residual plots. All right, so in problem 4-1, this was back in the very, very first lesson of chapter 4. We looked at the idea of viewing a football game through a tube, and we had collected data, and this is the data that we had collected. And this time we're going to use a calculator to create the least square regression line for us. So I turned it on. The very first thing that I did was diagnostics. So I had done second catalog, second quit on that one, second catalog, and I had gone down to diagnostics. And I turned diagnostics on. I actually did this earlier, but I'm going to go down again so we can remind ourselves. Second catalog, and we want to turn diagnostics on. And just clicking on it once is not enough. We need to make sure we get to the screen that says done. And then we want to go into stat, and we want to edit our list. And I have a list already entered of the 8 X values, which was the distance from the wall, and the 8 Y values, which was the width of field of view, already programmed in there. And now I'm going to go up and I'm going to go to the stat plot, and I'm going to turn my scatter plot on. I'm going to hit enter, and I've got the on flashing. I'm going to hit enter again so that it turns that scatter plot on, making sure that the scatter plot icon is selected, and I should be able to graph it. But my graph is not showing because I have not told it what part to look at yet. So I'm going to press zoom, and I can either scroll down to the number 9 or press the number 9 and enter. Wow, that's pretty good as far as being a strong, positive linear association. So that's great. We've got that piece in. We know that we are looking at our data. I'm going to do second quit, and then this time I'm going to do stat. I'm going to go over and ask it to calculate. I have 2 variables. Notice 2 columns. So I'm going to do 2 variable statistics. I'm going to ask it to calculate those. I'm going to look. My checksum is 816. And for the X, it says 816. I'm going to scroll down. My checksum for the Y is 122.4, 122.4. That's all good. So under stat and calculate, I'm going to go down to number 8, which is linear regression, A plus BX, and hit enter. And there was one little detail we had to do here, right? We had to tell it to store the data somewhere. And we're going to press vars and go over to y vars because we want to save the equation that it's going to create for us as a function that starts with y equals. So I'm going to hit enter, and I want it to be the first one. And I'm going to go down to calculate. And that's it. That's what we have for our BX, right? So 0.13 approximately is going to be our slope right there attached to the X. A is 1.66 for A, and that's going to be our Y-intercept. Now, don't forget I had mentioned in the last video, if this R and R squared is missing, it's because you forgot to turn diagnostics on. So if you are scrolling on this screen and all you see is the Y equals, the A equals, and the B equals, and then there's no 4th and 5th line, you forgot to turn diagnostics on, you can go back and turn it on and then redo this process, this last part, asking it to find your least square regression line. The other thing that I forgot to mention, because I had already typed my data in, was making sure before you type your data in that you reset that memory. I didn't do that at the start of mine because I had already entered the data into the table. All right, so now I have a graph with a least square regression line that looks darn good, I might add. And at this point, I'm continuing to do parts that are review. I'm going to go into edit, and you cannot do this part until after you get your equation, after you've got that line, because there's nothing to find the residual of if there's no line. You can't find how far a point is away from the least square regression line if you haven't already done the least square regression line. So at this point, remember, I'm going to go up to L3. I'm not in list 3. I'm actually telling it to fill list 3 with the statistic, and it's a very specific statistic, right? I want to fill it with second stat residuals. Oop, I went all the way up. I want to fill it with second stat, and I want to fill it with the residuals, and I'm going to hit enter, and that would fill in this column here for residuals. And then I want to go over to list 4. I want to go up because I'm going to tell it to do it to all of list 4. Same thing again, second stat. I'm going to go down to residuals, but list 4 is the sum of the squares is what I'm looking for. So I want the residuals squared. And I'm going to hit enter. And if you take a look, the magic of television, I have that table all filled in, and you can sort of spot check it. You know, if you look 0.046, and that rounded up to 0.047 because it was followed by a 9, negative 0.22, negative 0.2, and the 1 was rounded up to a 2, just to double check. You'll also notice if you go to the bottom, it also has 8 pieces of data, so that's a good thing. And the sum of the squares of the residuals is coming out to 0.599. And I want to double check that. And in order to do that, I can do second quit. I can go second, and I can go down here to the 0 and go to catalog. And I want the sum. So I'm actually going to go up because remember, sum is fastest to get there from the bottom of the alphabet instead of the top of the alphabet because it starts with the letter S. I'm going to go up from the bottom to find the sum. And because I want the sum of the squares of the residuals, I'm going to do the sum of second list 4 and 0.599. So that's good. You'll notice up here that I wrote in the equation that I got from the previous page, 0.13x plus 1.66. And you can also find that by pressing y equals. Now, they didn't round it, so there's your 1.66, right? I rounded to the hundredths place. And then if I scroll over, at some point, they finally give up and they stop. 0.133, and it's followed by a 3, so I went with just 0.13x. Again, I went to the hundredths place. So this part so far here is review. And then the purple line here, that is my y equals 0.13x plus 1.66. So I'm going to pause the video here and stop it so that all of the review part, if you need to go back, if you need to actually go through with your calculator and get those parts typed in so that you are where I am, this is a great place to review everything from 411 to 414. And I'll be right back with you in a moment in part 2.